Minakshi, start.
Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, day 4 of RBTS Web Symposium, Emerging Image of Homeopathy in collaboration with Homeopathy 360. So I, Dr. Minakshi, PG Scholar of RBTS Government Homeopathic Medical College, and heartily welcome you to the session of today on behalf of RBTS Government Homeopathic Medical College. So let's have a pleasant evening to all of you, and hope you all are fine during this pandemic situation. And I will be the moderator for today's session for all of you, and I am privileged enough to introduce today's speaker. So, I am thankful to Homeopathy 360 for giving us such a wonderful platform. And Homeopathy 360 is an online portal for publication of all kinds of course material, job vacancies, events, latest news on homeopathy, research papers, etc. It has been an exceptional education hub for all generation of homeopaths. You can submit your articles for publication at Yashika Arora at the rate of homeopathy360.com. And I sadly acknowledge the absence of Dr. Yashika Arora, who will be not joining with us today for the session, but virtually, but will be there with us technically on phone because we cannot do without her assistant and coordination. Dr. Yashika, hope you have you back with us tomorrow on this platform. And we are grateful to to Manish Jain sir, director of BZN Publisher Private Limited, for providing us this opportunity for encouraging education in homeopathy. BZN Group has always supported homeopathy in every way. So before starting the session, never forget to salute our master, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann. We feel very grateful for him. And as a homeopath, all our credits go to him because without him, we are nothing today. So thank you, master. So today, as a speaker, we have with us Dr. Sabiha Naaz ma'am, and along with Dr. Ashutosh Kumar sir. And today we will be learning with our speakers on different aspects about depression, anxiety, and stress. Hope it will be very fruitful for all of you. Without wasting so much time, we have already delayed our session because of some technical issues. So today, as the first speaker, we have with us Dr. Sabiha Naaz ma'am. Right now, she is in PG Scholar in Department of Practice of Medicine and alumni of National Institute of Homeopathy. And the inquisitive attitude brings out the researcher in her, and she strives hard to excel it. Her topic is stress as the new epidemic. So let's have a warm welcome to Dr. Sabiha Naaz ma'am. And I request every audiences that if you have any query or question regarding the presentation, you may put your queries into the chat box. After finishing both two sessions, our speakers will be answered your all questions. So you are most welcome, ma'am. Over to you.
Hello. Thank you,
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am, you
Minakshi,
are
for the
audible now.
thank you, Dr. Minakshi, for the warm welcome. Thank you for your gracious words, and I hope I can at least do justice to all the description you have given for me. I would like to begin the seminar firstly by thanking our principal sir, Dr. Professor A.B. Angar sir, for letting us seek the greatest opportunity which comes our way. Thank you, sir. And also would like to extend my thanks to Homeopathy 360 and Mr. Manish Jain for providing us with such a prestigious platform so that we can explore ourselves. Now, without further ado, let me just get started with my presentation, which says stress as the new epidemic. I know mental health is the new issue which is almost in topic for everyone. Everyone is talking about it, and but acknowledging my post and position, I wouldn't like to talk about it and degrade the gravity of the situation. I would leave this job to the professionals in this field. I would rather just speak about a little perspective of it, that is stress, which can act as a insider, as a cause, or as a maintaining factor. And so I will just start my presentation. As we have realized that we use the terms that is tensed, worried, under pressure, anxious to indicate the discomfort one experiences in seemingly demanding situations. However, these different words mean different things in psychological terms. In psychological terms, the discomfort that one experiences in a seemingly demanding situation is called stress. Quite in synchronous with my state right now, quite stressed right now. So let's see about the origin and terminology of this word. This word stress is derived from the Latin word stringi, which means to be drawn tight. According to Richard Lazarus, stress is a feeling experienced when an individual feels that the demands exceed the personal and social resources an individual is able to mobilize. In medical terms, stress is described as a physical or psychological reaction that may lead to illness. Let's have a look at what our Indian philosophy has to say about it. It says that our desires and involvement in material world are the basic cause of stress, which leads to klesha. Klesha is actually a Sanskrit word which means poison. In Hinduism or Buddhism, this is a negative mental state that clouds the mind, causing suffering. There are 5 types of kleshas. That is avidya, which is known as ignorance; asmita, that is ego; raga, which is attraction; divsha, which is repulsion; and abhinivesha, that is lust for life. In fact, out of all this, avidya, that is ignorance, is the base of remaining all 4. So we must seek realistic knowledge to be free from avidya. In Sanskrit, they are not only talking about mental health as arogya, that is absence of disease, but rather it is explained as swasthya, being relaxed and maintaining one's mental peace at the same time. The term stress was first employed in biological context by Hans SELYE in 1930, who was an endocrinologist. He explained stress as an inappropriate physiological response to any demand. Physiological in his usage, stress refers to a condition and stressor to the stimulus response causing it. It covers a wide range of phenomena from mild irritation to drastic dysfunction that may cause severe health breakdown. Now, coming to the definition of stress. A stress can be defined by Oxford Dictionary as a state of affair involving demand on physical or mental energy. It can also be termed as a physical or psychological stimulus that can produce mental tension or physiological reactions that may lead to illness. Richard S. Lazarus, who is a psychologist, and he gave the definition of stress, which is the most commonly accepted one, which defines stress as it is a condition or feeling experienced when a person perceives that the demand exceeds the personal and social resources the individual is able to mobilize. As for example, like if I have to deliver a lecture right now, like for example, I have this webinar to be presented, and just before this, as you all are all aware of the delay that we were having, So this was due to the technical issues. So the whole panic situation created a kind of distress in me. So this can be termed as stress. So any situation in which there is a demand increases and the body is not able to meet, so it accomplishes a distress situation. So that is stress. Now, looking into the burden of stress as to why I have taken this topic and why I have termed it as being the epidemic of this generation. So, how common is stress? According to Global Organization for Stress, it reports that 75% of Americans experienced moderate to high stress levels in the past month. Stress is the number one health concern of high school students. In fact, 80% of the people feel stress at work. People who tend to experience particularly high rates of stress include ethnic minorities, women, single parents, people responsible for their families' healthcare decisions. Worldwide impact of stress. What is it? While stress is a significant problem in the US, the rest of the world is sadly not immune to its harmful effects. In fact, stress is a global problem, with 91% of Australians feeling stressed about one or more important parts of their life. About 450,000 workers in Britain believing that their stress was making them ill, and 86% of Chinese workers reporting stress. This is a statistical graph that I have presented which shows work-related stress by age and gender in UK between 2013 and 16. Stress levels in India. Now, having talked about the rest of the countries, let's see what the scenario is in India. Stress levels in India remain very high compared to other developed and emerging countries such as USA, UK, Germany, France, Australia. This is a global well-being study which was conducted by healthcare major Cigna Corporation in 2019, and they have given this report. Close to 82% of the Indians are suffering from stress on account of work, health, and finance-related concerns. Those in the age group of 35 to 49 years, who are termed as the sandwich generation, are the most stressed of the lot, followed by millennials. Around 89% of the sandwich respondents said that they were affected by some level of stress, compared to 87% of the millennials and 64% of those above the age of 50 years. This is just a graphical representation showing the countries and their ratio, that is percentage. It is given like US, they were affected 55%, Greece 59%, Philippines 58%, and so forth. Prevalence of stress disorders. Post-traumatic stress disorder, which is also abbreviated as PTSD, and acute stress disorder are stress disorders triggered by traumatic experiences. Currently, 3.5% of adults in the US have post-traumatic stress disorder during a given year. Acute stress disorder affects as many as half of all the people exposed to a serious or life-threatening stressors. Now, moving ahead with the stress, now let's get an insight of what the whole scenario is. What are the aspects to be seen in stress and how to manage and how to deal with it. So starting with it, I would like to present the different models of stress. What are the different models suggested by various scholars? So first is the General Adaptation Syndrome. General Adaptation Syndrome, that is GAS model by Hans SELYE. He believed that Jens SELYE, he said that the body would respond to any external biological source of stress with a predictable pattern in an attempt to store the body's internal homeostasis. GAS may be defined as the manifestation of stress in the whole body as they develop in This GAS model consists of various stages which are as alarm exhaustion stage, and resistance stage. So, alarm stage, this is the first reaction to stress. At this stage, the recognizes that there is a danger and prepares to deal with the threat by flight or response, and it is adrenaline which will be produced to bring about this fear, fight, or flight. If this energy is repeatedly not used for physical activity, it can become harmful. This natural reaction provide energy to the body to deal with the stress situation. Second comes the resistance stage. After shock, the body begins to repair itself. In this recovery phase, it is on high alert for a while. And if we are able to overcome the stress, then the body continues itself until our hormone level, heart rate, blood pressure comes to normal. If this stress continues, the body remains in a state of arousal and it can lead to exhaustion. What are some of the signs of resistance stage are irritability, frustration, poor concentration, etc. Now coming to the last stage, that is exhaustion stage. In this stage, body's ability to cope up becomes less. So at this stage, the individual may collapse, and as a result, the body's immune system, that is the ability to resist stress, and it is manifested through various signs which are fatigue, burnout, expression, anxiety. If we just have a look back at the previous slide, the resistance stage represented itself in as irritability, frustration, poor concentration, and the exhaustion stage signifies fatigue, burnout, depression, anxiety. There are various models to illustrate for the presentation. The first one being appraisal model by Lazarus, which I have already said, a renowned psychologist. He believed that cognitive appraisal is the subjective interpretation which is made by an individual to a stimuli in the environment. And this stage, this whole phenomenon is divided, it can be further detailed as primary appraisal and environmental. Coming to primary appraisal, it is, if we just look at the terminology, means the art of estimating. So, to explain primary appraisal is a cognitive process that occurs when one is estimating whether an event is stressful to him or not. Just for the fact that a person has been exposed to a stimuli, it does not mean he will be under stress. It is the body who first prepares and tries to interpret stress is harmful and how much threat it imposes. So Lazarus argued that in order for a social situation to be stressful, it must be appraisal. He argued that cognitive processes of appraisal are central in determining whether it is potentially threatening or it is benign. What are some of the recent views regarding this? There are research into the neuroendocrine, molecular, and immunological basis of stress. There is actually a conflict here. There is a confusion which exists between the cause versus stress as a trigger of illness, which hinders the progress. Allegation that a stressor caused an illness is difficult to demonstrate in most human studies, which short-term stressor and examines the resultant physiological changes. There is, however, an alternative hypothesis that provides a very sense indeed for a link between the stressor and the illness. The argument emphasizes the illness in individuals whose underlying illness is latent or subclinical. For instance, the studies of physiological responses to stressors in normal individuals demonstrate large amplitude changes in physiological levels of blood pressure, gastric motility, and hormonal levels. Vulnerability and resilience is another sphere to be looked into. Vulnerability, what is it? It is the state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed. On the other hand, what is resilience? Resilience is the capacity of the body to cope up with the situation or to recover. So, in addition to the confusion between stress as a trigger and stress as a response, there is another key conceptual problem which revolves around the issue of vulnerability versus resilience or stress versus coping. The variability in response patterns monitored investigators to study how to interpret the stressful challenges. Just because a body is vulnerable to the stressor, in that case, the resilience power has also need to be evaluated. So this heterogeneous combination is referred to as coping behavior. Subsequently, however, the inquiry broadened and investigators examined individuals' defensive behaviors, information-seeking behaviors, affiliative behaviors, and all-around problem-solving behaviors, which are collectively referred to as coping behavior. The promoter region of the serotonin transporter gene had a powerful effect on vulnerability to stress. I repeat, serotonin, which is the promoter region of the serotonin transporter gene, had a powerful effect on vulnerability to stress. So, which means individuals who were homozygous for a short allele of the promoter region of the serotonin transporter gene were more likely to become depressed and suicidal in response to stressor. So this view that I have just now given related to serotonin, it clearly indicates that the stress-related psychiatric disorders are influenced both by genetic predisposition as well as environmental factors. In the past decade, researchers have begun studying epigenetic mechanisms that may account for environmental influences on development of stress-related disorders. Recent research shows that prenatal factors such as stress or mood disorders in mothers are risk factors or for psychiatric disorders in offspring. This is the reason why in our case taking, we do not forget to inquire into the intrauterine history of the mother if in case there is a psychiatric disorder in offspring. Measuring stress psychologically. Now, having spoken about the stress, let us see how to measure this stress psychologically. Regardless of whether stress is a cause or trigger, and regardless of whether one focuses on stress or the factors that affect resilience to stress, the key step is to recognize and in some way quantify its extent. We have to make sure at what extent this whole thing is imposed as a burden. So, however, it appears that many illnesses not traditionally thought of as stress sensitive are aggravated by stressful conditions. So, approximately 80 years ago, Adolf Meyer, he suggested that psychiatrists employ a live chart in evaluating the patient. This chart, as we can see on the big picture which is displayed, I know it's a little not clear, but I will just explain. It is actually a representation of the whole lifespan, starting from the birth of that person to the present state. And this chart clearly demonstrates what are the life events which have taken place during this whole time, and subsequently also the any such problematic stage which has occurred by during this time, which worsens the health problems, has also been noted. So this is a whole representation of a person from birth to the present day, indicating all the life changes which has all the events that has occurred, and correspondingly all the life health modifications, health derangements which had occurred. So it is placed side by side. This life chart turns out to be a very effective way of eliciting a clinical history. Sometimes recurrent patterns of association between life events and illness episodes are suggested. The next step in the evolving field of life events was developed by the fruitful collaboration of Thomas Holmes and Richard Rahe. After considerable research, they developed a list of roughly 40 life events which ranges in severity from death of a spouse to just maybe a receipt of a traffic ticket. So any of which can accredit to being a cause of derangement of health. So the underlying assumption is that all life events, be they positive or negative, imposes a demand for adaptation and that such demands are stressful. While at first blush, it may seem very absurd that positive life events are not totally benign. Like, for example, getting married may seem as a very benign episode, but as per the conditions that we look around, it also comes with a host of stressors. Another characteristic of the Holmes Rahe approach is that the items are weighed in terms of their adaptational demand. Finally, common to all the scales that measure stressful events is the problem of retrospective distortion, which is very much valid because the person cannot remember the whole of the events which has taken place from from the birth up till date. So it is not only that the high scoring individual is at risk, but the individual with an increased in life stress units is at risk for any number of health consequences. Now, looking at the stressor of stress. What do you mean by stressor? It is nothing but causes. As I have dealt with in my previous slide, in almost the initial ones, stress is, if it is considered as a derangement, then stressor is any of the stimuli that is the cause is termed as stressor. These can be classified into two categories clearly, that is external and internal. External are those which results from outside, and internal causes or stressors are those which are present within ourselves. Some of the examples of external stresses are major life changes, work, relationship difficulties, financial problems, children and family, personal health and safety. Internal causes, example are pessimism, negative self-talk, perfectionism, unrealistic expectations, lack of assertiveness, inability to accept uncertainty. Another aspect can be attributed to being a cause or stressor of stress, that is conflict of motives. Conflict of motives, when an adolescent, what it is, let's see, when an adolescent has more than one goal to choose, he experiences conflict of motives. That is, if he finds it difficult to resolve, he experiences stress. That's the reason I've kept this conflict of motives also as a part and parcel of cause or stressor of stress. And the conflict is a Latin word which means striking two things at the same time. This conflict of motives has different approaches. The first one being approach conflict. That is, there is conflict between two positive and attractive goals. As for example, a person wants to go out for a picnic with the parents as well as he wants to go to a party with a friend. So this is known as approach conflict. Both are the positive attributes and he wants either both of them. So in that case, he has to decide anyone. But that also might create a kind of conflict which might cause a little stress. The other one being avoidance conflict. Avoidance conflict, this is the conflict which involves two goals with negative values. I can quite relate, and I guess the students will relate because we think that we want to, like the students, they want to study. They neither do they want to study nor they do want to fail in exams. So this is an example of avoidance conflict. So there is a conflict between two negative goals. The third one being approach avoidance conflict. That is, there is a conflict between a single goal which has both positive perspective as well as negative perspectives. For example, again very relatable is sometimes that we want to bunch on maybe pizza, cake, chocolates and ice creams, but at the same time we know having them will cause weight gain. So we know that this leads to there is one goal, and we know that there are two perspectives of it. So there is a positive side to it as well as a negative side to it. So this represents approach, avoidance, conflict. Then comes double approach avoidance conflict, where the individual faces conflict between two or more goals, which have equal positive and negative effect. For example, a person cannot decide as to whether he wants to ride a bicycle or he wants to ride a motorcycle. But both of them comes with pros and consequences. In such cases, he is never happy with his decision because abiding with one, he will have to lose the other of his goal. So this is almost, it will never give a satisfaction. Now coming to the next broad heading, that is types of stress. Stress can be classified as hyperstress and hypostress. This hyperstress can further be classified as eustress and distress. Distress again is broadly classified into acute stress and chronic stress. Hypostress, it is the insufficient amount of stress. Hypo, less, and stress, so the word combines together to form insufficient amount of stress. Actually, people with hypostress are working on unchallenging jobs. This is just an example of hypostress, that those people who are working in unchallenging jobs in which they become demotivated, unenthusiastic, and restless, and this may be due to work underload. But on the other hand, we should not confuse it with the term leisure, because leisure is a quality time which is spent away from work or domestic duties or studies after a heavy period of work. Whereas before the previous one, the former one had a negative impact, and this is relaxing and recreational qualities, and where we have freedom and choice for our leisure time. Now, what is hyperstress? Hyperstress, there is high stress which leads to panic or exaggerated reactions. Due to hyperstress, a person may experience panic attack and may engage in exaggerated reactions like throwing temper tantrums. It leads to frustrations or agitations. Now, speaking about eustress. The Greek prefix eu means good, therefore it is good stress. According to Merriam-Webster in 1975, eustress is a positive form of stress having a beneficial effect on health, motivation, and performance and emotional well-being. Dopamine and oxytocin is released, and both of which we know are associated with positive feelings. Now coming to distress. Distress is negative type of stress, where an individual experiences it when the normal routine is constantly adjusted and altered. Here, adrenaline and cortisol are released, and as we know, adrenaline increases heart rate, elevates blood pressure, and boosts energy supplies, whereas cortisol, the primary stress hormone, it increases glucose in the bloodstream and enhances brain's use of glucose and increases the availability of substance that repair tissues. Now, talking about distress, distress can be broadly classified into two types, that is acute stress and chronic stress. Acute stress, this is the intense short-term period, and this chronic stress is long-lasting and recurrent. Acute stress occurs when there is sudden change in routine or when we experience panic or threat, whereas chronic stress, it causes constant changes in routine for a long period of time. In fact, this is the worst type of stress. This picture demonstrates some of the warning signs and symptoms of stress, such as increased cholesterol level, increased alcohol, blood pressure. There may be localized inflammation in the knees. There may be faster blood clotting. So these are all the warning signs and symptoms of stress. So now we'll be speaking about selected physiological responses to stressors. So if we are exposed to a stressor, what are the physiological responses which will be aided? So the body's reaction to a stressor, be it real, symbolic, or imagined, is to initiate a set of responses that seek to diminish the impact of the stressor. So there is an exposure to the stressor. The body will initiate a set of responses which will diminish the impact of the stressor. A stressor disrupts an organism's equilibrium, and the stress response consists of initiation of physiological adjustments which seek to react to the stressor, bring about an adaptive response, and resulting homeostasis. So, stressor influences, it disrupts the equilibrium, and the stress response is generated, which in the form of brings about adaptive homeostasis, which in the form of physiological adjustments, and it brings about adaptive responses which helps to restore the body's homeostasis. Much is known about the physiological
सर हाँ हो गया हम
Much is known about the physiological response to acute stress, and considerably less is known about the response to chronic stress. This represents a major gap in the physician's ability to relate to the effects of the stress and to the occurrence of psychiatric illness in humans. So, this is the lacuna which we have to overcome. So, now looking forward to neurotransmitter response to stress. Stressors activate a release of catecholamines, including noradrenaline, dopamine, and serotonin, and also amino acids and peptidergic neurotransmitters. Physical stressors, they recruit the brainstem and hypothalamic brain regions. Physical stressors, the examples can be blood loss, trauma, hypothermia. So these they have the affinity for the brainstem, and they recruit the brainstem and hypothalamic brain regions. Whereas the psychological stressors, example, embarrassment, work-related stress, these engage brain regions which are involved in emotions, that is amygdala, learning and memory region, that is hippocampus, and decision-making region, that is prefrontal cortex. Now, if we deal with the endocrine responses to stress, that is activation of HPA axis. What happens here is corticotropin releasing hormone present in the brain. It acts upon the anterior pituitary to release ACTH, which acts on the adrenal cortex, and it stimulates and synthesizes release of glucocorticoids, which helps in fight or flight response. But at the same time, it inhibits functions such as growth, reproduction, and immunity. The most threat of all is immunity, which becomes hampered in such situation. A relevant feature of the HPA axis response to stress is that it varies depending upon whether the organism is exposed to the stressor on a single occasion or more than once. So, or over a prolonged period of time. So, the stress response can change dramatically depending on the frequency and duration of exposure. Now, let's see about the psychoneuroimmunology. Researchers have come to appreciate that the immune system is also a key player in stress physiology. There are numerous bidirectional interactions between brain, behavior, and the immune system. As we can see in this picture, the CNS is linked with the immune system by two major physiological systems, that is HPA axis, which I have just now detailed, and the other one is ANS, that is autonomic nervous system, which comprises of the sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers. So these sympathetic fibers, they decreases or suppresses the activity of immune cells to destroy the pathogen, and they also enhances the production of antibody by the B cells, that is humoral immune responses are generated. And these macrophages, they release cytokines, and as we know, cytokines, especially interleukin 3 and 5, these are responsible for epithelial damage. So the clinical implications of psychoneuroimmunology and cytokine It has an impact on cardiovascular diseases, in infectious diseases, atopic dermatitis, stress, depression and rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, and psychoneuroimmunology. So these spheres are the ones which are mainly affected. The next is behavioral and psychological influences on immunity. This is acute stress and immunity in humans. Acute lab stresses, for example, the mental arithmetic, it produces profound and rapid changes in the immune system due to the redistribution of immunoregulatory cells from lymphoid organs such as spleen into the vascular space. Talking about the chronic stress, depression and immunity, chronic or naturalistic stresses such as bereavement or caregiving as well as depression are all associated with reliable decrease of cellular and innate immunity, along with the increase in pro-inflammatory cytokine activity, which possibly due to downregulation of glucocorticoid receptor signaling. So, depressed patients who have comorbid alcohol abuse or tobacco smoking show exaggerated declines of natural and cellular immune responses. Personal characteristics such as coping and personality, that is positive affect, which moderate neuroendocrine and sympathetic activity, also contribute to individual differences of immune responses to psychological stress as well as vaccine responses. Now, getting to know about sleep, cytokines, and immunity, their relation, we know that disordered sleep and loss of sleep are thought to adversely affect resistance to infectious diseases and alter inflammatory disease progression. Whereas cytokine influence on CNS and behavior, this can be explained by the nerves and immune systems convey information to each other, ultimately regulating neuroendocrine and autonomic outflow and the immune response. So the immune activation leads to changes of peripheral physiology and that is similar to stress responses. Stress and psychiatric illness. So there is adverse life events and stressful social and familial causes plays an important role in pathogenesis of schizophrenia, and hence stress and psychotic disorders are highlighted here. It also has an impact on affective disorders, anxiety disorders, which are other than post-traumatic stress disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder per se. Now comes the most important part, that is the treatment part. So, having a look of it, pharmacological approaches to stress management. Stresses worsen most psychiatric conditions. When major psychiatric conditions like depression or psychosis are present, the most appropriate medications are those for the primary psychiatric diagnosis. Intervention in association with supportive psychotherapy is extremely effective in crisis intervention. This is a very important sphere to be dealt with, that is the cognitive behavioral approach to stress management, which is abbreviated as CBT. CBT methods are increasingly used to help individuals better manage their responses to stressful life events. These treatment methods are based on notion that cognitive appraisals about stressful events and the coping efforts related to these appraisals play a major role in determining stress response. Lazarus et al., they have developed models of stress and coping that serve as conceptual foundation for most CBT stress management protocols. So this CBT therapy has been found to have significantly greater improvements in intrusive thoughts about cancer, cancer-related anxiety, and emotional distress than patients in the control condition. So CBT has been effective in decreasing symptom severity and healthcare utilization costs in patients with chronically unexplained medical symptoms. Like for example, in this slide that we see, there is the external stimuli which is present in the environment. When it gets filtered, a person perceives it. So this is a state of primary appraisal where he interprets about the stressors, whether it is a positive or irrelevant or dangerous. If it is positive or irrelevant, it does not affect the individual. But had it been dangerous, then the phase of secondary appraisal comes into play, where the individual analyzes the availability of his resources, because now we have to figure out if the resources present with him are sufficient or insufficient. If it is sufficient, again he can lay back. But in case of insufficient resources, this is the time when there is a condition of distress or stress, and it is during this time that the coping action has to come into play, that is the action of overcoming of stress. So this coping can be dealt with in two categories, that is problem focused and emotion focused, which I'll be dealing in my further slides. So the major aim of CBT is, the first aim is that it will help individuals become more aware of their own cognitive appraisals of stressful events. The second aim is that it will educate individuals about how their appraisals of stressful events can influence their negative emotional and behavioral responses, and it will help them to reconceptualize their abilities to alter these appraisals. The third aim being is to teach the individuals how to develop and maintain the use of a variety of effective cognitive appraisal behavior and stress management skills. So now, coping with stress strategies. It can be broadly dealt with in two forms. It may be problem focused and it may be emotion focused. What is problem focused? This is a direct way in which the stressor is reduced. That is, this is the direct way of reducing the stressor or direct way of resolving conflict. If a person has been exposed to a stressor, that is an external stimuli, he strives to fight against it. So this is a direct way of approach. And this will lead to information gathering, and he will eventually learn a skill in coping up with that stressor. On the other hand, emotion focused. Emotion focused will be the person whole energy will be directed not towards the stressor, but rather towards the negative emotional response which might take place. So he has an upper hand with the emotional responses and he tries to curb on them. So this this leads to certain skills in him, which is avoidance, learning to relax, and ventilation method. Now comes Freud's theory of psychoanalysis. According to Freud, theory of psychoanalysis, our personality is controlled by three aspects: id, ego, and superego. Id operates on primary process thinking, whereas that is id, in cases of id, the logic rules do not apply. These people, they operate on two energies. For example, if a person likes someone, then in turn he will want that person to like that person. Or let's take another example. If a teacher is in the class and the student feels hungry, as soon as the impulse is there that the student feels hungry, it will try and eat so that his hunger is satisfied. So this is id, that is, it is operating on primary process thinking only, and the logical rules are not applying. So this is id. The next one is ego. Ego operates on reality principle. That is, ego, that the immediate, it will try to immediately curb the urge which was produced by id. Id, as the example which I had given, suppose a person A in class feels hungry and wants to eat. So id will allow that person to fulfill its desire, but ego on the other hand will suppress this desire. Ego will direct that person and it will give the logical thinking as to the teacher is in the class, so you shouldn't eat. So maybe the thinking process is a little bit delayed for the afterwards. So it is the social It is the immediate satisfaction of the urges, which is by id. It needs to be controlled in ego. So ego dwells into the secondary process of thinking. Now comes superego. It internalizes moral values. This is the one which initiates the right and wrong in us. The basic thinking of that person, not to us, will not be that the teacher is in the class and that it has to be scheduled after class gets over. Rather, that person will have an insight as to if I eat in class, the teacher might get hurt. This deals with the principles, all the right and the wrong. So eat where it operates primary thinking, that is, it has to fulfill its desire. That is, do not apply in this case. Ego will operate on the reality principle. It will practically think, and superego is the one which will judge between what is right and what is wrong. Now, mechanism are the unconscious strategies which is used to protect the ego from due to unacceptable and harsh reality. It is a saving device. It functions as a shock absorber. Excessive use of defense mechanism to a habit of escaping from reality and indulgence in falsehood about one's ego. Basically, that what we have seen in previous slides is that this defense mechanism is actually used to protect the ego from shattering. It employs various methods. So these methods are, the first one being denial of reality. The reaction formation. The third, regression. The fifth is rationalization. So repression. This is an unconscious mechanism which is employed by ego to keep disturbing or threatening thoughts outside our. The next one is displacement, that is redirection of into a less powerful target. Then comes projection. It involves the individual attributing to their own thoughts, feeling, emotions to another person. Then comes sublimation. This is redirection of energy or motion into social acceptable behavior. Identification. Identification is this is adopted when other persons. This is adopted in the cases of identification. This person adopts the other person's mannerism. For example, if a mother gets angry for no reason, then the child, in turn, other than blaming the mother, and reflect her behavior in the form of same mannerism. So this is education. And the second last is daydreaming. So in order to reality, this is the way out which is thought. For example, if a person is not dreams of buying a car, so in that case, he reverts back to daydreaming. He desire by dreaming about this car and fulfilling his fantasies. The last one, realization, it occurs when we attempt to create or explain excuses failure. For example, if we do not pass an exam, we blame another person for it. Maybe we will say, and this is the main, this is relatable. In this case, we can like attribute, okay, the paper was not easy, or was tough. That's the reason I flunked an exam. So these were the few defense mechanisms to protect the ego from shattering. So now comes the most important part, that is stress management and training. Stress management and training, it deals with certain aspects such as self-observation, reconstructing, relaxation training, time management, and problem solving. So what is self-observation? This is one of the most effective ways of individuals become more aware of how they respond to problem situations and have a daily record of their behavior. So they are required to keep a record of how they are coping up with the situation. So a daily diary format is often used with the patients who are asked to keep a record of how they responded to challenging or stressful events that occurred each day. Entries are made in 3 columns: antecedent, behaviors, and consequences. The next one being cognitive restructuring. What is this? This is actually a hallmark of CBT, and it is insistence that cognition plays a central role in the stress and coping process. So, in cognitive behavioral therapy, that is, cognitive appraisals about stressful events are considered to be the key factor in determining stress-related responding. Eventually, the participants develop a rational response that represents a more accurate and helpful cognitive response to the situation. Then comes relaxation training. What are the, before instructing or before suggesting this, what are the requisites which are required? That is a quiet environment, a comfortable posture, and passive attitude. What are the techniques which can be employed to enhance generalization? The first is a method called differential relaxation. A second generalization method is the mini. This is the mini appraisal method. This can be relaxation therapy can be superaided by such instances such as music therapy, dance therapy, yoga, physical exercises, aromatherapy. This will all lead to curtail down on the stress. So relaxation training. Relaxation training is frequently used in managing stress in persons suffering from chronic medical disorders such as cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and chronic pain. So, a person visiting us with such chronic diseases should always be recommended for this relaxation training, in which these various methods such as yoga or listening to music or dance therapy may be followed. These are some of the stress management therapies which can be done, that is spending time in nature, yoga, music, therapy, spa, exercise, or indulging into favorite hobby. Now, there are certain journals that, although this topic of mine, as it was a very broad spectrum one, so there were various journals and articles which were present, but I could just jot it down to few of the journals, just 2 of them I would be discussing about them. So this one is the first journal, and the name of the journal is Prevalence of Post-Traumatic and General Psychological Stress During COVID-19, a Rapid Review and Meta-Analysis. This is published in Psychiatric Research, and it was available online on 31st July 2020. By Rachel Eric and et al. This journal illustrated it was a rapid review and meta-analysis of post-traumatic stress and general psychological stress symptoms during COVID-19. Electronic searches were conducted up to May 26, 2020 using key terms mental illness and COVID-19. And this comprised of 14 non-overlapping studies were identified for inclusions. Random effects meta-analysis indicated that the pooled prevalence of post-traumatic stress symptoms and psychological stress in the general population was 23.88% and 24.84% respectively. Overall, nearly 1 in 4 adults experienced significant stress due to COVID-19 pandemic. So this journal clearly indicates that there is a prevalence of stress, especially during this time, that is COVID-19, when we are locked and instructed to stay home. Okay, so the next journal that I'll be just going through is about this journal named "It is Like a Mind Attack: Stress and Coping Among Urban School-Going Adolescents in India." This was published in BMC Psychology. Authors are Rachna Parekh et al. And date of online publication for this journal was 28/5/19. This exploratory qualitative study was conducted in Delhi and Goa. Participating students were drawn from Hindi medium high schools. 22 focus group discussions were conducted. Each of this group included 5 to 60 participants of age ranging between 11 to 17 years. Separate boys and girls and mixed group was also evaluated. The study was conducted, and the result out of this study was organized into 3 broad categories. So the first category was common ecological stressors. It means the stressors were elaborated. What are the different causes for stress in these sample? The second one being the experienced reactions to stress, that is stress reactions, which was also made clear in such a study. And the third being coping strategies. So the common ecological stressors, as to when dealing with it, the most frequent stressor, the most common stressor was academic pressure. This was identified stressor as across the sample, irrespective of age, gender, and site. The students felt this academic pressure a lot, and this was a reason for their stress. The second being in list is the romantic relationship. The third being negotiating autonomy. And the third was safety or victimization, which unfortunately was mostly prevalent with the girls, such as like eve teasing and all, which caused a sense of stress in the population. The second was stress reactions that was identified from this study. The English term tension and stress were used almost universally across the sample to describe everyday experiences of emotional distress. Synonyms were mind attack, depressed, suffering, fear, and sadness. And then come the coping strategies. After being exposed to the stressors that we have come to know, the various stressors, the most common one being the academic issues, and after knowing about the stress reactions, the various reactions students had on being exposed to such stressors, the third was the most important part, that is, they came up with coping strategies. How did these adolescents they cope up with such stress situations? They detailed it. For example, some of them described a range of coping mechanisms such as support seeking. These adolescents, some of them went to parents and teachers for seeking help. The second one, distractions. Actually, this is just a reflection of what I had already discussed before as to how can coping strategies be classified, where I discussed about daydreaming and all. So it is also a kind of the reactions or the coping strategies where these students in this study adopted in order to overcome their stress. So they went for support seeking, distraction, they diverted mind to something else. Behavioral activation, they participated in valuable activities like they spend time with friends, studying and playing with younger children, etc. Then there was another method which was adopted by them, that was escape and avoidance. This is not like they could not discuss the problem with their parents nor the teachers. If it is suppose it was concerning marks, they couldn't have discussed their problem with the teachers and neither with the parents. So the better way out for them was escape and avoid. Then came the part of self-soothing. So they tried to relieve the stress via yoga, meditation, breathing, etc. Then was the part of problem solving. Some of them wanted to get rid of the stress by directly facing them. That was problem solving. So they're relatively uncommon. Although this was relatively uncommon, the person or the individual sat in a corner, tried to analyze what was the stressor and how he can develop ways so that to get over this stressor and relieve its stress. The another technique which they followed was prayer. This is what we do in this desperate time when we have no one to support. We lay back to one and only the Almighty and leave everything to Him. Then came the part of substance use, that was tobacco, cannabis, alcohol, as a means to forget about the stress and reduce tension. This was also a way which was adopted by the adolescents. And the last one was suicide, the last resort to find relief from sense stressors like sexual assault and rape, and in severe cases and sustained academic pressure, where the adolescents could not find a way out, so they resorted back to this attempt of suicide. So these were the various coping techniques that they adapted. Okay, coming to the almost last part of my whole presentation, it deals with the conclusion. So we can conclude it like the development of culturally sensitive and age-appropriate psychosocial interventions for distressed adolescents should attend to challenges posed by home, school, peer, and neighborhood environments. Enhancements to problem and emotion-focused strategies are needed in order to booster adolescents' repertoire of adaptive coping skills in stressful social environments. What we have seen till now, the stress is a central concept for understanding both life and evolution. All creatures face threats to homeostasis, which must be met with adaptive responses. Our future as individuals and as species depends on our ability to adapt to potent stressors. Acute stress response in young and healthy individuals may be adaptive and typically they do not impose a health burden. But in cases of individuals who are optimistic and have good coping responses may benefit from such experiences and they deal well with chronic stress. In contrast, if these stressors are too strong and too persistent in individuals who are biologically vulnerable because of their age, genetic or constitutional factors, stressors may lead to disease. So the relationship between psychosocial stressors and the disease is affected by the nature, number, and persistence of the stressors as well as by the individual's biological vulnerability, that is the genetics, constitutional factors, psychosocial resources, and learned patterns of coping. Psychosocial interventions have proven useful for treating stress-related disorders and may influence the course of chronic diseases. So, coming to the end, I would definitely like to discuss about the homeopathic aspect and how is stress dealt with and how has Dr. Hanneman and other stalwarts, what do they have to emphasize regarding this matter. So as we know, health is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being and not merely the absence of a disease or infirmity. According to this definition, homeopathy is the only system of medicine which have an integrated approach in understanding the role of mind in health and disease. certain aphorisms where Dr. Hahnemann has emphasized or he has instructed the readers as to how to handle such situations. So beginning with it, if we just look at aphorism 4, which deals with preserver of health, he clearly emphasizes in this aphorism that he is likewise a preserver of health if he knows the things that deranges health. So a physician must be well aware of all the conditions which is leading to this stress built up in a person. So not only he must just cure it, but at the first instance, he, being a preserver, he should instruct the patient to be away from such influences. Aphorism 7, which we know as it indicates about causa occasionalis, and in the footnote, Dr. Hahnemann has already mentioned that it is not necessary to say that every intelligent physician would first remove this where it exists. What he meant was if it is in the form of indisposition and just the removal of it will restore the health back to its normal state, then and any intelligent physician would rather take away this maintaining cause rather than treating the patient. He would just remove this maintaining cause, and as a result of which health would be restored back. In aphorism 77, we also dealt with inappropriately named chronic diseases, where he said those diseases are inappropriately named chronic which persons incur who expose themselves continually to avoidable noxious influences. So, if a person is exposed to stress, if it is acute stress, it might be overcome by the person himself. But if it is a chronic stress, along with the medications, if it is due to reasons which can be avoided, then the physician has to instruct the person to just stay away from them so that it can be restored. The other aphorism is where he deals with accessory circumstances, where he says, by inquiring into the traits of chronic diseases, the particular circumstances has to be dealt with. That is, in this aphorism, he clearly mentions that if there is a case, a chronic case, we have to look into all the accessory circumstances related to the age, sex, occupation, socioeconomic conditions, and everything, so that we get an insight whether or not if that person is under the influence of some maintaining cause which needs to be removed along with medication. And last of all, if this stress poses as an obstacle to recovery, then the physician should know what are the obstacles and how to recover them in each case, as mentioned in aphorism 3 by Dr. Hahnemann. View of Boni Hussain in this aspect says, Boni Hussain remarked with regard to one of the aphorism of Hippocrates that there are numerous cases of icterus which manifest themselves on the day following an emotional upset and are cured equally quickly by the remedy corresponding to the symptoms such as aconite, chamomilla, nutswarm, etc. What does J.T. Kent has to say about it? Kent considered that the mind is the center of the whole functioning of the whole organism, and that it is also the focal point from which the disease process starts. So this should be taken into account. In fact, it should be given prime importance. C.M. Google says the relative time for the appearance of each symptom naturally varies with the speed of the disease. From this, we reason that the earliest mental manifestations are decidedly the most important of all the symptoms. William Borwick's view regarding this aspect, where mental states and emotions are evident primary causes or contributing factors to the production or continuance of the diseased conditions, homeopathy offers much useful aid. Thus, remember the adaptability of coffea, aconite, opium to the ill effects of different emotional disturbances, especially gelsemium to the effect of fear. All these remedies which we read in a Materia Medica, which says bad effects of or ill effects of different emotional disturbances. For example, gilsenium deals with the bad effects of fear. Ignition, phosphoric acid deals with the bad effects of grief, etc. So our homeopathy is enriched with such medicines which can be thought of in such circumstances where stress acts as a cause for the derangement. So this was it with my presentation. I would like to just end by saying, quoting what William James said, the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. So it is not possible. We cannot control the wind, but we can definitely adjust our sails. So we cannot control the stresses which will come in in our way, but we can definitely strive to like cope up with it and find solutions and maintain our calm and composite. So this was my presentation. Thank you for listening. And I would ask for pardon if I have missed any part or said something wrong. So do forgive me for that, and all the suggestions would be welcomed, and thank you. And lastly, I would definitely seize this opportunity to thank Dr. Vivek Shah sir, who thought me as a competent as a speaker for this platform, and last but not the least, Dr. Amit Sahani sir, without whom this presentation wouldn't have been possible. His contribution has been a greater effect, and Bhaiya, thank you for placing the confidence in us. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening, everyone. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah, Minakshi.
Am I audible?
Yes, Minakshi,
Ma'am?
you're audible.
Such a wonderful presentation, ma'am. You gave excellent coverage on this topic. And there is no doubt that the spread of COVID-19 all over the world is most stressful condition nowadays, and we all are suffering from this. And the most common thing faced by all of us is fear and anxiety about this disease, and it is an alarming situation for all people nowadays. So people may who strongly respond to this situation is frontline workers such as healthcare providers, and one who have responsibility for their family members and near and dear ones, and migrant workers who experiencing homelessness, and children and teens who study being hampered. And so you ma'am told that different therapy about the stress, and along with this we have to focus on facts and reject the rumors about false news, and take break from watching, reading, or listening fake news and social media posts which may have bad impact on our mental state. So now the session is taken over by our second speaker, Dr. Ashutosh Kumar sir. And now I want to introduce himself. And he has done his graduation from Dr. Halim Homeopathic Medical College and Hospital, Darbhanga, Bihar, and post-graduation from GD Memorial Homeopathic Medical College and Hospital, Patna. And right now he is working as an assistant professor in the Department of Anatomy on the RBTS Government Homeopathic Medical College and Hospital. His learning aptitude and is well reflected in his teachings, and students enjoy his way of teaching of anatomy. So today he will discuss with us about the topic of homeopathic understanding of depression and anxiety. So let's have a warm welcome to you, sir, who is joining with us now. And I have request to all the audiences, if you have any queries regarding previous presentation and recent presentation, you may put into the chat box. After finishing this session, our speakers will be answered your all queries. So, sir, you are most welcome. Hello, sir. Your video is not visible.
आशुतोष वीडियो आ रहा है, साउंड नहीं आ रहा है. यस,
हेलो
देयर. यस
हेलो
आशुतोष, आवाज आ रही है.
थैंक यू सर. हेलो, थैंक यू मनीषा.
Sir, over
Thank you
to
Manisha.
you.
And good evening to everyone, especially Dr. A.B. Angar sir and Dr. Manish Jain. So today's my presentation is homeopathic known depression and anxiety. First of all, depression is most common medical and is approximately in world is more than 450 million people are affected to this disease. This this is a very common, and अगर इसका कोई भी एक एग्जांपल लगा तो कभी भी and place and any other situations whose strike to your mind, जब तक आपके माइंड को कोई बॉडी, कोई मैटर्स या कोई थिंग्स स्ट्राइक नहीं करता है, तब तक आप किसी चीज को सोचते नहीं हो. दैट्स यू हैव कैन नॉट थिंक. जस्ट आफ्टर स्ट्राइकिंग यू हैव थिंक एंड यू हैव एंजाइटी, एंड दिस एंजाइटी इज कन्वर्ट इन द डिप्रेशन. जैसे अगर मान लीजिए कि किसी को ट्रेन पे चढ़ना है, ट्रेन पकड़ना है, एंड हिज गोज किसी भीड़ में अगर वो फंस जाए, एंड दिस टाइम ऑफ द ट्रेन इज वेरी लिटिल remaining time, then is very depressive and very anxiety. How can anxiety are removed in his mind and his feel fresh? But in this some conditions, this anxiety or the depressions goes in higher a long time. This is two things. It's more minor, medium, and over. So तो क्रोनिक में ये क्रोनिक भी होता है और माइनर भी होता है. क्रोनिक में काफी लंबे समय तक इसमें रहेगा, काफी लंबे समय तक लॉन्ग टाइम तक कोई भी पर्सन एक ही बात को उसके माइंड में स्ट्राइक करता रहेगा और वो अदर्स सीवियर कंडीशंस बॉडी में स्टार्ट हो जाता है. जैसे सम स्किन डिसऑर्डर्स, some other abdominal disorders, and other so many causes. What is the cause of anxiety and the depressions? The cause, familiar cause, environmental cause, society cause. This is minor. Can you listen? Huh. So this anxiety and the depressions are the minor and the chronic. This is a sodic, and according to a miasm, the depressions and anxiety are acidic. But in some conditions, he's turned directly syphilitic. In these conditions, what is the symptom of the anxiety and the depressions? The symptoms is disturb of appetite, loss of thinking, and uh, interest are not well. किसी भी काम में उसको इंटरेस्ट नहीं होगा, कहीं भी कोई भी चीज उसको अच्छा नहीं लगेगा, that not want to talk in, and also he was goes silent and very moody person. हर बात में इरिटेटिव, हर जगह वर्किंग ऐसा जो एक नॉर्मल बिहेवियर से अलग होगा. तो नॉर्मल बिहेवियर से एक्टिविटी क्या अलग होगा कि डायरेक्टली किसी से बात नहीं करना, टाइम से डाइट नहीं लेना, कोई चीज अच्छा नहीं लगना, वर्क में उसका कोई भी so many causes and so many things. So this is a very critical conditions. What is the relation between anxiety and the depressions? So without anxiety, no anybody is goes in depressed. अगर कभी भी किसी स्टूडेंट्स एग्जामिनेशन के लिए अगर निकलता है तो उसका टारगेट यही होता है कि वो टाइम से एग्जामिनेशन हॉल तक पहुंच जाए. बट एट ए टाइम किसी वजह से फॉर एनी कॉज ही कैन नॉट रीच ऑन द प्लेस ऑफ द एग्जामिनेशन हॉल. स्टूडेंट that he was very depressive, and if any cause his failed to reach of the examination hall on the time, and he was so very late reached on the examination hall, then he was so depressive and his goes a long term. Then he was first create an anxiety, then he goes to a depressed after reach the home, and in the way examination hall to home he was anxiety person. Anxiety person इसलिए कि वो पूरे रास्ते में यही सोचेगा कि जल्दी पहुंचता, बट आफ्टर हिज a result, then he reached home, then he goes to very depressed कि his my life of the examination I have failure to examination hall, goes to examination hall, so he's very a critical conditions. In the anxiety, relation of the rubrics are the relation of the rubrics are aversion to society, you have a thinking, company aversion, उसके बाद moral affection, anticipation, and timidity. So, and his cares full of fear and so many other rubrics you have taken in these conditions. And in the depression, weeping, weeping, उसके बाद brooding, complaining. So depressive person is complaining from the others. In the office, a person says of the boss कि आप सिर्फ मुझे बोल रहे हैं, आप दूसरे को नहीं बोल, वो गलती करता है, आप उसे नहीं बोल रहे हैं, आप सिर्फ मुझे बोलते हैं. So he is complaining, but he does not know कि what he is doing and what is the other person doing. So this is a very critical conditions. दूसरा, defection, despair, grief, helpless, and hopeless. And he was says appreciate me. So is many things. तो ऐसा उसके दिमाग में ये बार बार आता है कि ऐसा लोग उसके साथ कर रहे हैं. लेकिन वो इस चीज को अपने आप को वो किसी वैसे उन जगहों पर रख के नहीं देखता है जहां पे वो what he is doing wrong. तो इसलिए he was a person so depressed and his goes a very long. His goes in the chronic conditions. ये हो सकता है कि उसका एटमॉस्फेरिक चेंज हो और उसका प्लेस चेंज हो, तो ये his body person is goes on the correct his fate, but the depressions strike on the mind in the his come to insecure conditions. This negative effect is affected in the other part of the body. Is the common, क्योंकि we are a homeopathy सकते हैं, तो उसमें उसके हिस्ट्री में कई बार ऐसा आता है कि हाँ किसी वजह से उसको उस समय उसके माइंड को ऐसा स्ट्राइक किया गया या उस समय वो ऐसा डिप्रेसिव हुआ या उस समय ऐसे एंजाइटी में था जिसके वजह से और जिसके ठीक होने के बाद आज उसके बाद ही ये कंडीशंस डिजीज कंडीशन से राइज हुआ है, तो ये कह सकते हैं कि ये उसका नेगेटिव इफेक्ट अदर बॉडी पार्ट्स पर हुआ. Anxiety is the very common. Each and every people are anxiety. Family से related, money से related, society से related, and so many things. But how we can we say the anxiety is the very severe conditions, or person who's accepted a anxiety for a long time in a particular things or a particular matters. So it's a long time, and his constant thinking, he's a constant thinking on the particular things, and for his thinking a long times. But his effect, the negative effect of this mind is affected in the mind and the other part of the body. What will we have say? We have say the anxiety and the depressions are two relation to each other. The type of the depression is dysthymia, minor, psychotic, postpartum, and sad. Sad means seasonal affective disorder and bipolar. The dysthymia and the bipolar are the chronic. His affected on the mind is for the very long times. Minor is the comes sudden and goes sudden. That's in the previous I have give you an example. A person to have to reach a train, and after a sitting, that's all anxiety and depressions are is gone. That's no any effect on the mind and the other body. But in the psychotic or postpartum is a strike on the mind for the long time is the medium category. So for 1 month, 2 months, or more than 6 months, his and that's his go away. After change his atmosphere, change his place, or his जो बात उसको डिप्रेस कर रहा था या जिस बात के लिए वो सोच रहा था, जब वो मैटर हट जाएगा फिर उसके बाद हिज ऑल राइट goes all right, but his slightly affect on the body. But here a dysthymia and the bipolar are is the very long time, is many years. हो सकता है कि पर्सन्स को आफ्टर 15 years, 10 years and 20 years के बाद तक भी वो स्ट्राइक करता रहे एक ही बात को कि उस वक्त की ये गलती या उस वक्त का ये बात जो आज भी है, या उसने जो वो गलती किया, he is doing a mistake or he is doing wrong before 20 years, before 15 years. And whether the anxiety, the type of the anxiety is generalizing anxiety disorder, obsessive, compulsive disorder, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress, and social phobia. whether the generalized anxiety disorder is very short. ये किसी के ऊपर एक दो दिन के लिए भी हो सकता है, किसी के ऊपर हफ्तों के लिए हो सकता है, बट ही इज नॉट more affected after sometimes or a minutes his goes and patients feel better. But obsessive compulsive disorder and panic disorder goes a very long time. He's chronic, a matter he's always a strike in the mind. So in the previously, the type of the anxiety, previously I will said family history, imbalance. इसमें imbalance certain chemicals, certain medicines are also is the cause of depression. Some medicines are given by a modern medicines physicians who's depress the mind. So, and other cause, the major life changes is the anxiety and the depressions. What is the major life changes? It may be अगर कोई वर्केबल पर्सन है और सडन his loss his job, then his a major changes in his life. This comes a major changes. If a person depend on his guardian, but sudden his loss guardian or loss at home, his a major changes, and so other things whose major changes in your life. And and what you have goes in the condition of the depressions. If somebody is fighting his situation and goes forward, but in somebody is not found to how I have leave these situations. तो हम इस सिचुएशन से जिसको बाहर निकलने का कोई भी ये नजर नहीं आता है, then his goes in the depressed and his person sadness, irritability and loss of interest in everything and disturbance of appetite, and his goes wrinkled and looking like idiotic. His cannot tells friendly nature talks in each and every one. So, and what is the additional signs? The additional signs, the changes feelings which may include feeling empty. He's feeling empty. वो पूरा खाली है अपने आप को कि उसके अंदर अब कुछ नहीं है. No power present to fight at a situation, बस वो अपने आप को छोड़ देता है समय पर कि कभी टाइम आएगा तो ये खुद पर ठीक होगा, मेरा सिचुएशन सही हो जाएगा, अगर नहीं आया तो दैट्स हिज गोज टू ए फेल्योर कंडीशंस. And in some conditions, patient thinkings for a suicide and destroy himself, and sometimes he try. And in the syphilitic condition, he'll do it. So the loss of feelings for family and friends, his cannot any feelings about the others, loss of self-esteem, hopelessness, change his behavior and attitude. These may include in general slowing down, neglect of responsibility and apprehense, poor memory, inability to concentrate. And previously I have said you his suicidal thoughts or his feeling or his behavior, and sometimes his attempt to suicide. In physically, sleep disturbance, such as early morning walking, sleeping too much or insomnia, lack of energy, weight loss, or again unexplained headache or backache, indigestion, stomach trouble, in the major depressions, the dysthymia, this type of a symptoms that may be suddenly possible, tracked by a loss, crisis of changes, interfere with normal functioning, and this is the continuation for the months or the years. It's possible for a person to have only one episode of major depression. It is more common for episode to be a long lasting or to occur is several times during person's life. In the dysthymia, people with this illness are mildly depressed for a year. They function fairly well on a daily basis, but their a relationship suffer over time. That's I have previously said the dysthymia and the bipolar are a chronic conditions. So in the bipolar, people with this type of the illness change back and forth between the periods of depression and the periods of mania. मतलब एक तरह से उसको कह सकते हैं उसके माइंड में एक तरह से एक मेनिया भर चुका है, जिसमें व्हाट इज दिस सिम्टम्स हैव सेड सीन लेस नीड फॉर स्लीप, ओवर कॉन्फिडेंस, रेसिंग थॉट्स, reckless behavior, may increased energy or a loss. Mood change are usually gradual, but in sometimes a sudden mood change. So this sign and symptoms, I have previously said, the symptoms of the sign of the anxiety are shortness of breath, palpitation, and inability to still and claim, dry mouth, numbness, tingling in the hand or feet, nausea, muscle tension, dizziness, cold or a sweaty hand and feet. These all signs are seen in the acute condition of the anxiety or a sudden anxiety. And whether in the depressive conditions in the minor uneasiness, uncontrollable, obsessive thought, repeated thought or flashback, nightmares, ritualistic behavior such as repeated hand washing, somebody repeated hand washing, somebody's walking, somebody his work time to time at same work, those he have finished, but he says time to time he's working on same work and same place, and his change of the behavior, sleeping problems, his sudden wake up and walking in room or in lawn or in road. So what is the complications? The complications are in the depressive conditions, patient taking alcohol, taking abusive substance, anxiety, work or school problem, family conflicts, relationship difficulties, social isolation, suicide, self mutilation such as cutting, premature death, or the other medical conditions. So these all are the acute condition of the depressions. But in the some conditions, that's like a alcohol, abusive substance, anxiety, suicidal tendency, this goes prolonged. And whether in the anxiety, the patient goes depression and he's also taken an abusive substance, trouble in sleeping, digestive disorder, headache, teeth grinding, and substance use disorders. वैसा सब्सटेंस यूज करता है जो बॉडी के लिए, उसके हेल्थ के लिए और उसके लिए सही नहीं है, खुद को इंजोर्ड करेगा, and how can I diagnose? In the depressive conditions, consult with doctor, physical examination, it's maybe in the other health issue or not, complete history of symptoms, rule out all other possibilities, and as the same as in a anxiety, interview and discuss about the health history. The symptoms are positive, patient will be referred to a psychiatrist, or a physiologist for the special diagnosis. To know about the other health issue or a mental disturbance or not. So, according to a miasm, the anxiety and the depressions, I have previously said, the anxiety and depression are a sodic miasm, So in the sodic conditions, he's quick to grasp what he's thought. Concentration level is so high, always makes an attempt to improve after failure. In the sodic conditions, good photographic memory, but for a short time his loss. Positive imagination and creative. So we have to say that कि अगर डिप्रेशन और ए एंजाइटी पर्सन इन सोडिक कंडीशन है तो वो सडन रिवर्स हो जाता है इन द नॉर्मल लाइफ में. बट his goals in the psychotic conditions, his suspiciousness, secretive, mischievous, forgetful, absent-minded, ambition तो उसका बहुत बड़ा बड़ा रहता है, ये होगा वो होगा, but his thought and the memory is not like ambitions. Compulsive behavior, and in these syphilitic conditions, destroyed, fixed and rigid idea, जो हम कहें वही सही है, बाकी सब गलत. Pessimistic view of life, forgetfulness, loss of memory, mental dullness, and advancing to a mental paralysis. In tubercular miasm, we have seen mental restlessness, dissatisfaction, lack of tolerance. They can quick change from good tempered minded to being disagreeable and angry, finishing what they start. In the professional treatment, what we have done, so we have done in the professional treatment, see a doctor, counseling by a homeopathic physician or the other physicians, and cannot ask for such type of a questions whose more strike his mind. He is also a physician and also a friends and also a family members, and cannot strike and cannot, मतलब उसको वैसा कोई भी बात नहीं बोलना चाहिए, और जो गलती वो किया है या जो गलती उससे हो गया या जिस गलती के लिए वो डिप्रेसिव है और एंजाइटेड है, उस गलती के उस रॉन्ग वे के लिए उसको बार बार स्ट्राइक कभी नहीं करना करना चाहिए, क्योंकि his patient goes may be a syphilitic condition if patient in the sodic or a psychotic condition. हो सकता है कि वो पेशेंट खुद को फिनिश कर दे, खुद को डिस्ट्रॉय कर दे. So these are the precautions. What have you given a medicines? So depressive medicines we have given according to EMIAS, the medicines in the sodic mias: arsenic album, calcaria car, causticum, lycopodium, hypersulfur, graphitis, etc. for the condition of a depression. And for the anxiety, mesodymium, natramure, petroleum, phosphorus, sodium, silesia, sulfur, zincum, and so many medicines. According to a WHO, 450 million people are suffering for depression in 2020. And 100 million in less in 2015. Nowadays, is depression and anxiety is a medical conditions for age is 16, 15, 16 to more than 40. So all people in this group is more or less are affected. जब in 2019 WHO जब सडन इंडिया में एक यहाँ के कम्युनिटी में एक रिसर्च किया, सडन ने देखा तो he's found a 1.6% people are affected of depression. 1.6%. His school to office. Now we have come to any medicines in the psychotic conditions. Psychotic mias, causticum, calcaria car, kali sulf, lycopodium, natrum sulf, sepia, staphylococcus and thuja, and some others. In syphilitic mias, arsenic, aurum metallicum, lycopodium, mercurius, phosphorus, nitric acids, etc. In the repertorial approach, in the Kent repertory, the depression are given under the sadness with their medicines. But in Boning-Hussain characteristic repertory, his both rubrics are given, depression and the sadness. In the depressions, given a general medicines, and under the sadness, his different category is given a medicines. In the synthesis repertory, depression and sadness both are given. Medicines according to thermal relation in the chili, arsenic, aurum metallicum, calcarea carb, calcarea ars, carboenamylis, causticum, chamomilla, china, simicifuga, and so on. These all are the chili medicines. In hot, ars iode, aurum mure, calcarea sulf, calibrom, lachesis, natrum mure, natrum sulf, opium, pulse, sternum metallicum, sulfur, thuja, and etc. In the thrustless, arsenic, gelsemium, ignatia, lycopodium, natrum sulf, sepia. The thrusty, aconite, arsenic, ars iode, aurum mure, causticum, graphitis, hyoscyamus, calibrom, caliphos, and mercurius. What is the treatment? For the treatment of the depression and the anxiety is this can help the depressed people understand themselves and cooperate with their problem. For example, interpersonal therapy works to change relationship that affects depression. It's maybe cognitive behavior therapy help people change negative thinking and behavior patterns. And the other, don't expect too much of yourself. कि वो पर्सन आपके तरह ही चलेगा, ये ऐसा एक्सपेक्टेशन बिल्कुल नहीं करना है. Take a break and get some rest, avoid extra stress, avoid extra stress is the big changes his body and the mind. He's do some yoga with their medicines, not only a exercise or not only a yoga without a medicine, but with their medicines. This is most important. Improve his mood, improved self concept, improved work behavior, and decrease the depression and the anxiety. Improve the social network. Now, medications, drugs used to reduce the symptoms and the anxiety disorders include antidepressant and the anxiety reducing drug. मतलब ये नहीं कि उसको पूरे होल लाइफ तक ही उसको खिलाते रही, जैसे जैसे उसका कम होता जाए वैसे वैसे ड्रग को छुड़वाते चल जाना है. Thinking to do, reduce or eliminate the use of alcohol or a drugs who's depressed his mind. Exercise and engage in some physical activity. Proper eating, taking that time to time. Focus on positive aspect of life. Pace yourself, modify and scheduled, and set a realistic goals. Thinking about to avoid, don't make a long-term commitment or a important decision unless necessary. Don't assume things are hopeless. Don't engage in emotional reasoning. Don't assume responsibility for events which are outside of your control. Don't avoid treatment as way of coping. So many thanks. Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
Ashutosh. You have finished it. Yes, Ashutosh, you have finished your presentation.
Yes, I have finished my presentation.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Minakshi, you
Hello.
can take over.
Thank you.
Such a nice presentation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Monica.
now, okay, sir. So you such give us informative information about the stress and anxiety. And now we have some question from audience side, and I have sought out some question for you, ma'am, Sabiha ma'am. Your
Yes, Minakshi, go ahead with it.
okay, ma'am. Your first question from Dr. Bhuvan Kumar. That is, he is asking that, do you think stress is ever good, useful, or necessary?
So, Bhuvan, in response to your answer, as I have already mentioned in my slides before, that stress could be classified as eustress as well as distress. So, eustress, as I described, it was positive good stress. This is because during this stress, there is release of dopamine and oxytocin, which has a positive impact on the person. अगर if I just explain it with an example, और ये phrase सुना ही है, कुछ दाग अच्छे होते हैं वैसे ही कुछ stress अच्छे भी होते हैं. As for example, if you see, we students throughout the year we do not study, but right at the time of exam we are updated with our syllabus. What is that? That is eustress which acts in pain. So at that time our body under the stress delivers positive results. So of course at that point stress acts as a vital warning system and it produces the capability to fight against it.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much for your explanation. And second one is from Dr. Mithilesh Kumar Gupta. He is asking that please set one another example of ID, ego, and superego.
Okay. So as I said about ego and superego, id is something which prohibits one to do something. For example, I'll just cite an example for this. Like for example, if you're standing in a line in ATM counter, maybe you need to purchase some stuff, and if I'm in a hurry, so I am in a hurry and I need the money. So what will I do? I will break the chain and I'll go and purchase that stuff. So my in fact, I'm like going. So this is id. So if I need the money, I'm breaking the chain and I'm just going for my desire. So this is E. On the other hand, if there are a number of people standing and I know I need the money, but still I am not breaking the chain and I am not going. So this is ego. Whereas I know I need the money, but I should not break the chain. Why? Because the people in front of me, they will be affected by this behavior of mine. So this right and wrong sense comes into play. So this is superego. I hope this answers the question.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. And there is one question from you, sir, from audiences. And that Rajnikant is asking that why are women likely to depression more than men?
Uh, yes, women is more depressive than men because in some mood changes and the depressed feeling occur with a normal hormonal changes. But hormonal changes alone don't cause depression. Other biological factors in hearted taste and a personal life circumstances and the expressions are associated with a higher risk. So, Rajnikant, maybe you have satisfied.
Sir, hope this will be fruitful for all of them. And next question is from Rajesh Kumar. He asked that how can we determine if an illness is causing depression or depression is causing an illness?
Uh, depression is an extremely complex disease. No one knows exactly what causes it, but can occur for a variety of reasons. In the previously, I have said a family, a social, or a workplace, and so many. So the critical illness increase, maybe a medical conditions also is the depression or anxiety. The risk developing severe or depressive illness, according to organon of the medicine, elaborate both the aspect of the mental disease there between the aphorism 210 to 230 by the Dr. Henneman has explained that mental disease can be both physiosomatic and somatic physio conditions. Okay?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. And this all about the questions answer session. And now we are all the ending session of this webinar. That is now the most important, special, and heartily thanks to BJN and Homeopathy 360 and their staffs and doctors for their constant support, dedication, teamwork, and untiring efforts for giving us such a wonderful platform to share our knowledge as well as clinical experience. And even in this stressful indoor schedule due to this pandemic, Homeopathy 360 has come forward and initiated this whole not new complex new platform to engage the students as well as impart informative session for all of us. And thanks to all the audiences for listening the session and make it successful. And I want to thanks Dr. Amit Sahani sir for your constant support throughout the session. And so we are come to the end of the session, and we will see you all tomorrow at 4 o'clock again with two new topics and two great speakers. Hope everybody will join us again at tomorrow. So I am just ending this event, and in Dr. Sabiha ma'am and Dr. Ashutosh sir, you want to say something?
So we had a very good session today. Thank you, Minakshi. You were very nice, and it was a nice presentation by Dr. Sabiha. You have dealt with the subject of stress in a very nice way. It was very informative and exhaustive. The homeopathic understanding of the stress is very important here, and you have very nicely opined about the new epidemic. I hope this our young doctors, they will be using it in understanding the cases of stress. Thank you. And Dr. Ashutosh, understanding anxiety and depression from the perspective of homeopathy, you have explained it very nicely. Congratulate both of you. We are sorry for the technical issues that had cropped up initially. We are also unable to show you the beautiful presentations of Dr. Ashutosh. Anyways, that was all for today. We will meet again.
So thank you, sir. So thank you, sir. And
yes. With this, I once again thank you all speakers, Dr. Ashutosh, Dr. Sabiha, the coordinator of the day, Dr. Minakshi, our principal.
Thank you so much, sir.
Manish ji, and for providing this opportunity, and Yasika for your backend support. Thank you. So we can end the session now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you all of you. Thank you.
so thank you very much, sir. And thank you, Manisha, and very nice, Sabiha. And thank you all of the teams who support me, and sir, especially Sani sir, who supported me very nicely, and But so very thanks to all.
So we can end the
Thank you,
session now.
sir. I'm just ending the event. Stay safe and stay well.